shape the line and enable the line to sing. And to achieve that, we need to have a good technique of tremolo, which enable us to sustain a line. But the difficulty is that, unlike the melodic instrument, they're only doing the line with piano to accompany. We are also accompanying ourselves, so we need to think about both the melody and the accompaniment. So let's talk about the technique of tremolo first. I think there are a few key things we need to have on mind when we practice. The 4 objectives for practicing tremolo are evenness. This is in terms of the tone, the dynamic, and the depth. You put your fingers on the strings. They all need to be even in order to produce evenness in every way. And the power, dynamic, the accuracy, and the speed. So let's talk about one by one. I suggest that if you haven't feel quite in control with your tremolo, I suggest you use a metronome to practice to achieve the different tempos that you're able to do. So let's talk about the evenness first. I think one of the common problems is that when people doing the tremolo, it's not quite even. For example, some people sound like that. So we need to identify this problem. If you record yourself playing the tremolo at a very slow tempo, you might figure out what's the problem. Is that this I and M fingers too close, or M and A fingers too close? And when you practice slowly, you could have that problem on mind. And to fix that problem, you could also use different rhythms to practice. For example, let me put on the metronome at a very slow tempo. This is 80. And then we can do the opposite, dotted rhythm. And of course, then you can use different tempos. And this is 100. And then change. Just to train your fingers to be able to do different rhythms. And in the end, we have to go back to the normal rhythm. Make sure they are even. And also dynamically even as well. So if you have, for example, lots of people's A finger maybe is the weakest. If your A finger is weaker than others, we can also practice with the accent on the A finger. Or if you feel that your I finger is weaker than others, you can put an accent on the I finger, like So basically, the key thing is to identify your problem. Maybe you can record or you watch yourself on the phone, and you can spot your problems, and then we use different ways to solve the problems. In the end, we need to play the tremolo at a fairly fast speed. So you need to make sure that your 3 fingers kind of on the string at a comfortable depth. Because our fingers are at different lengths, so we need to have a kind of even length of the nails, and they are placed on the strings at even angle, and so they take similar amount of time to go through the strings. So when we're doing the tremolo at a quick speed, they are kind of comfortable and even. The nail lengths are quite essential, I find that, when playing the tremolo. So next thing, power and dynamic. I think that I find a lot of players, they struggle to have dynamic when playing tremolo. But it's very important. Imagine that if you're singing a song, a good singer will have a good dynamic. So my tip of achieving dynamic and power is to practice a slow tempo and use rest stroke. So let's try this. With very slow tempo, you are able to use the rest stroke. See, that's a lot. more powerful than free stroke. Of course, in the end, we are not able to really play rest stroke when we're doing the whole piece. But the point is that when you practice slowly with rest stroke, you train your fingers to get used to the dynamic, and you get used to the powerful sound. So the point is that when we use free stroke in the end, we try to maintain the same sound as using rest stroke. So accuracy, this is also one of the challenges when playing tremolo pieces. We tend to play tremolo with bigger movement, but that have a risk of touching other strings. For example, if we play the beginning of this piece on the second string, as marked on the score, if you move too much, you could touch other strings. So this is, and when you are nervous, and when you're trying to play more powerfully, this could be more risky to touch other strings. So that's another reason I suggest you to practice rest stroke, because when you're practicing rest stroke, you're kind of forced to be closer to the string rather than move a lot. Also, I suggest you to do practice this A section of the Alhambra on the second string, because that's a very good practice. When you are playing the tremolo on the second string, you are forced to not move too much your fingers, otherwise you will touch the first string. And when you do practice on the second string, think about that. Be careful with the movement, not to move too much and waste all your energy. So the A section of the Alhambra is a very good practice on tremolo in terms of the dynamic and the practicing rest stroke, and make sure your movement is not too much. Finally, the speed. Speed is quite important when playing tremolo, because when we're trying to maintain the line as a singing line, we need the tremolo to be at a certain speed, and then they could be sounded like a line. But also, I find that one of the tricky things about the guitar tremolo is that every three notes we have to put a bass note. So if sometimes if we wanted to play the tremolo quickly, the bass line could be too quick, and we might want the piece a bit slower. For example, Alhambra, I quite like the beginning sections more reflective and not too quick, so we need to space out the bass note and not play the bass line too quick. So that requires that your tremolo, the three fingers, need to be able to do a tremolo at any given tempo to make sure that the tremolo sounds like a line, sounds like a singing line. So for that reason, again, I suggest to use metronome to practice. So the agenda is that you are following different tempos and to train your fingers to be able to play the tremolo at different tempo.